Do we have Mr. Simpson available? That's then. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Bailey. People represented by Ms. Clark and Mr. Darden. The jury is not present. Counsel, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We need to look at the videotape that I take it these are now excerpts from the videotape that we
Yes.
viewed yesterday.
In line with Your Honor's instructions, we have now tried to comply, and I think you'll provide Your Honor a copy at 9 o'clock. There's one additional tape, which is very short, which we've been playing that tape. I'd ask them to take it playing at the outset.
All right. Ms. Clark, let me ask you this. Do we have an objection from the people as to, have you seen the excerpts, first of all? All right. Do you lodge any objections to any of the excerpts? Which ones?
I'm going to need to... Actually, I think I'm going to need to play it and show the court which excerpts. That
Okay.
might be the most effective thing.
Let's take it from the top.
Okay. Stop right here. Oops. Can you stop? Yeah? Okay, thanks. Part of the problem is shown just before this frame and in this one as well. And the problem is with this tape, with the excerpts that I'm going to be pointing out to the court, is the lack of depth, the lack of perspective. Under 352, this tape is clearly more misleading and more prejudicial than probative. The problem that we have is that we have a cameraman whose angle and position is unknown, and we have the use of a lens, the nature of which is unknown. The problem created by this is that there's no depth perception, and it's more misleading than it is informative because it winds up making everyone look on top of each other. What you can't see is where their feet are positioned. You can't see the ground that their feet are positioned on, and that is the whole point for which the defense is attempting to introduce this, is to show that people were walking through blood and contaminating evidence. The tape fails to show that, and even worse than that, is misleading in that it tends to leave the inference that the feet are in blood or contaminating blood as they move when you really can't even see them. So the tape does not, in fact, inform you of where the feet are because you never can see them. It makes it appear that they are stepping in areas that they're not because of the lack of depth perception. And the court has been there, so the court is aware of the way the area really looks, and you can see how flattened this picture really is. It doesn't depict the distances.
But hasn't the jury also been there?
They have, but you can't count on the jury to remember everything in such great detail. I will tell you that, Your Honor, I've been out to that scene 4 or 5 times, and in between I have every time forgotten what the distances were really like. Every time I go back there, I'm surprised at how small that area is in front where the fences meet to the north and to the east, and surprised at the length of the walkway, the number of stairs going up and down. You can't remember this accurately. No one can. So the fact that the jury went is helpful, but certainly does not resolve this particular problem. Moreover, to the extent that their memories fade, their accurate memories will be replaced with this misleading video that it has no probative value because it doesn't show the very thing the defense purports to use it for, which is where they're stepping. And as we advance the tape, the court will see how bad this problem gets.
Do we get to hear her narrative, or can I respond at some point?
Well, let's watch the
This is called-
first excerpt, and then I'll hear.
This is called argument, I think, and it's at least. At this point, you can really see where the detective is standing.
Detective Phillips.
Right. Now, here again. Can we stop that? Same problem. We can't see where Claudine Ratcliffe, who is the woman to the left of Tom Lang, is standing. You can't see whether she's standing in a clear area or in an area that the defense, as the defense wants to allege, is bloody. Same thing with Detective Lang. You can't tell by this video where he's actually standing. The inference the defense will ask the jury to draw is that he's standing in blood. I'm sure that's totally untrue. Nevertheless, the impression created, which is a totally misleading one, is that they are, or might be. The fact of the matter is this tape does nothing to clear up that issue. In fact, it does the reverse. It clouds the issue to make it appear one way when it is in fact another. By this tape, it would appear that these people are standing in blood if the defense inference and spin is to be bought by this jury, when in fact that is not the case. So what you have here is a piece of evidence that not only does not inform the jury of the truth, but actually hides and distorts the truth.
Right. How about the next portion of the...
Right. And the timestamp is right over their feet, obscuring the very point that the defense is trying to make.
Well, let me hear what Ms. Clark's objections are to first clip, and then I'll hear your response, Mr. Cochran. Mr. Harris.
And the court can see, again, the timestamp continued to obscure their feet as they stood there. And now we have a person who completely blocks the view.
Detective Phillips.
Again, you can't see where Claudine Ratcliffe is standing, whether her feet are on plastic or whether they're on the ground itself, whether they're in blood or in a clear spot. Everything up to here is largely irrelevant. Again, you have Claudine Ratcliffe shown there in the background, as the court could see. No, there's no way to tell where she's standing or where she's walking. You can see that Detective Lang is taking some care in the way he steps, but what you can see is where he is stepping. His feet are obscured. The area he's stepping in is totally obscured. Same thing here, same problem. You can't see where these people are standing. You can't see the area of the case. You can't see their feet. You can't see the ground they're standing on. As the court can see, at every point so far, when the defense would ask the jury to make an inference, the very point that they're trying to make is obscured.
Mr. Harris?
It continues on just a little bit further.
This epitomizes the problem with this whole tape. It looks from this that everyone is standing on top of each other with not 2 inches between them. We know that is not the case. That obviously can't physically be the case, but it's such a misleading and distorted clip that you can't tell where everyone is standing. You can't appreciate the spatial distances, and you certainly can't see from any of this where their feet are. Same problem here. Again here.
Ms. Clark?
I think that what this clip shows the court is the very reason for the existence of Section 352 of the Evidence Code. This is a piece of evidence that is not evidence. This is a distortion. This is a method of confusion, and it does not inform the jury of anything of probative value. In fact, quite the contrary, it obscures the facts that it purports to, that the defense says it purports to show, and that is where people stood and whether the crime scene was properly handled. It doesn't inform the jury of any of that. It's very distorting. It's very misleading. They have not produced the cameramen who could come forward to tell us. Oh, there's more.
No, we're just looking at the first clip at this point, taking them one at a time. Mr. Harris, thank you.
Yes, this is still part
Still part of the first clip.
It is?
I didn't watch this part of the tape. I thought the tape was over.
Me too.
So there's a lot of blank space in the
Well, see, no one told us that.
And we can't tell them how to watch.
Yeah,
the
well,
tape.
we're not gonna sit up and
Wait,
watch
wait,
an hour blank.
Wait means stop. This looks like the same thing over again.
I have to rewind over here.
All right, let's take up the first segment that you're offering first. All right, Ms. Clark, do you have any other objections?
Furthermore, and lastly, that they have not produced the cameraman who could tell us where he stood. I'm sure it will be something in the nature of across the street. And someone who will tell us the nature of the lens he used. I'm sure there's some sort of telephoto lens. And I'm sure that if an expert were called, because we have received calls from experts after this tape was shown yesterday, they will inform the court of just how distorting and misleading this really is. It won't be hearsay when they come in to testify. But I really don't think that it's appropriate for the court to allow the jury to be misled this way. And that is the purpose for Section 352. The probative value is nil, and we'd ask the court to keep it out for that reason.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cochran?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like very much to get to the cross-examination, and I will not belabor this point. I think it's a sad day when we have a videotape of the scene, Your Honor, that where there's a proper foundation. Cases say we don't have to bring in the cameraman. No one is trying to mislead anyone, Your Honor. This is a videotape. And Ms. Clark protests too much, Your Honor. They obviously don't want the jury to see this. As you pointed out, we've all been out to the scene. There are certainly spatial differences, but one can see that yellow tape very clearly. I went through yesterday with Detective Lang with regard to what was shown there at various times. Ms. Clark's problem throughout the whole presentation of her case is she's worried about what we're going to do and what we're going to say. This tape is a tape taken that morning, Your Honor, on 3 particular periods of time. It's taken when Detective Lang greets Miss Radcliffe and advises her what's happening. The bodies are still there. It's taken when the body of Nicole Brown Simpson is moved. It's taken when the body of Mr. Ron Goldman is moved. It shows us also, if the court pleases, when Mr. Jacopo arrives at the scene. We also see Mr. Fung, the criminalist, there. That is far more compelling evidence than the hours she spent with detailed little questions, and we're showing exactly what happened. When and where does it say that a videotape, an accurate depiction of what happens, would not be admissible under 352? It's preposterous, and it's sad, Your Honor. It's really sad. Further, Your Honor, we've done everything that you've asked us to do with regard to this. We started talking about this tape in an opening statement. We presented them a copy of this tape on January 23rd. They will do anything they can to avoid having the jury see an actual tape of how things looked that day. Judge, with regard to any spatial differences, we have a detective of some 28 years' experience, a very, very competent detective who will be able to tell where people were standing and that sort of thing. They don't want the tape shown because they don't have the tape, we have the tape. And we're the ones trying to help this jury see what really transpired. Who could complain about a tape of what actually happened? We didn't make this up. This is what happened contemporaneously with the events. It is the best recollection of what took place. And as to the spatial differences, we have witnesses, we have the yellow tape, we've all been out there. We know it's a small area. And so I think, Your Honor, they've objected on this for months now, at least 1 month. Isn't it time to proceed with this, Your Honor? We've lost one whole morning. We'd like to proceed with our cross-examination and to get this done. This is admissible, it's appropriate, it's relevant, it's a videotape of what took place, Your Honor.
What's its relevance?
Its relevance is to show exactly what happened with regard to, for instance, the officer testifies that he doesn't remember whether he's wearing gloves or not. It shows us who's wearing gloves at the scene, who's wearing anything over their shoes. It shows us what the coroner's people are doing at various times. It shows us this particular scene. And Judge, this scene and what took place, this scene becomes very relevant in this case. Because if the evidence was not appropriately and properly collected, if there was contamination at this scene, we have an absolute right to show this. This is a videotape. This would be almost like, and I'm sure that in the Rodney King case, I'm sure the prosecution argued you can't show that tape. The defense argued we couldn't show that tape. But this is an accurate recollection of what took place. So why in the world would it not be shown? It has relevant testimony about the arrival of people, what they did, how these bodies were placed, where things were, with Fung coming in there with his collection of things. There's great relevance, and it also goes to impeachment. For all those reasons, this is it's relevant. It's not prejudicial. We took out the prejudicial parts. In fact, I mentioned to your court yesterday I would do that yesterday. So we've been talking about this for more than a month. And their objections about spatial differences are obviously cured. We've all been out there, Your Honor, and we have Detective Lang.
Well, don't you agree that there's at least one shot there where everybody's lined up on the sidewalk when I believe one of the bodies is about to be moved, and everybody's sort of lined up, and you can't really tell who's standing where because of the lens distortion?
No, I don't agree with that at all, Your Honor. We know where these people are. There is a yellow tape. There's some people beyond the tape, some people within the tape, and we can cover that with the examination of the officer who was there. That has nothing to do with admissibility. That has, Your Honor, with all due respect, it has to do with the weight of it. And I think we will carefully cover that with Detective Lang. It's not offered.
You agree the court still has 352 jurisdiction over
Oh, the
this?
court has certainly 352 jurisdiction, but the court also wants, this is a search for truth. And I cannot see, if this is a search for truth by both sides, how anybody could object to a videotape of what actually took place there. I mean, they were talking all the time about the truth and what went on, and that's folly. We want to show this. We have the officer there, Your Honor, who can make this clear, and the prosecution never gives the jury any credit. Marcia Clark says that each time she goes out there, she forgets how small it is. But I think these jurors will not forget how small it is. I think Lang is here to remind us, Your Honor, and this is relevant testimony. It's very relevant. It also has some impeaching aspects, and where there's any effort or any possible confusion, that'll be cleared up by Detective Lang.
All right. Let me see excerpt number 2.
Is that, Your Honor, Detective Lang, be outside with that? Oh.
No, I don't think we've finished all of the ones on this
one.
tape.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
Fast forward mine.
This is segment 3.
See, Your Honor, this is the same problem we have throughout the tape. You know, the defense is basically stating that they have the absolute right to distort, confuse, and mislead this jury. You can see from this tape, the problem is that the people would have absolutely no objection to an accurate videotape. From the previous shot you saw that introduced this segment, you can tell it's being shot from across the street at some distance from the location, which is why they had to use a zoom lens. And that's why we have everything so compressed as it's shown here. These people look like they're within 1 inch of each other. You can't tell where they're standing, you can't see their feet, and you haven't been able to see their feet in any part of this segment yet. This right here shows them like literally in a dog pile on top of each other. We know that can't be true. But you can't see where they're standing. You can't see where their feet are. You can't see the ground they're standing on. You can't see the spatial relationship between them. If there was any accuracy to this videotape, the people would not object to it. The very reason the defense wants it is because it is so misleading, it is so inaccurate, it is such a distortion of the truth. If the defense really wanted the truth, then it would be calling these people to the witness stand to say where they stood and what they were doing and whether they were wearing booties or whether they were wearing gloves. You don't have to put on this pile of distortion and basically lies to get the jury to believe in something that never occurred. And that's what's so unfair here, is that this is the nature of this videotape is going to mislead them to the point where they will not be able to remember they are not going to be able to remember the crime scene from their own memory nearly as well as a very recent depiction on videotape. I would also remind the court that there is a video that will be shown concerning what the defense still frame picture. Never mind. The vice and the problem with following the defense lead on these things is that they are deliberately hiding the truth from this jury. And they did that with the American Journal. They did that with the American Journal photograph. Then I don't know if the jury knows to this date that the photograph they showed was a still frame from a video. They would never have known that in fact it was shot by some news tabloid agency had I not brought that out. Had the people not marked an exhibit that was the duplicate of that showed what that logo was that the defense blocked out. And we're going to have more to show the court about that later. But in showing that to the jury, they deliberately created the inference that before any testing or collection was done, officers were traipsing up and down the walkway. We're going to prove that's not true. We're going to prove that's a lie. And the problem with this tape is the very same thing. They have an impression created by a distortion with lens and with position. They inform the jury of nothing probative. I understand the difference between admissibility and weight, but in that term, this is weightless. This is really non-probative. The only value in it is to distort, mislead, and confuse the jury, and that's the value the defense seeks to get from it. But truth, there's nothing resembling the truth that this jury will get from this videotape.
Ms. Clark, do you have access? Because apparently one can tell just by some of the distance shots that there are a number of video photographers at the location. And inadvertently, I have myself seen on television many versions of this same activity taken from different shots. Do you have access to any of those?
I haven't. We haven't been able to. We, as a matter of fact, tried to get a hold of the cameraman who produced this tape, and they have resisted our subpoena.
Channel 5?
I'm not sure the name. We're going to check. I'm informed by Mr. Darden that we're talking to their lawyers in Chicago. But in the meantime, what we have here...
Well, let me just ask you, you don't have any other videotapes from any other sources of this particular activity?
No.
Okay. Mr. Cochran?
Yeah. Prosecution could go back and try to get O.J. Simpson's medical records in 1970 in Buffalo, and they can't. Everybody in America has seen these videotapes. Your Honor, and I think that the court's going to see who's being disingenuous in this instance. This is a videotape. We didn't create it. This was shot by local people. She's talking about distortion and lies. This was shot by local TV people, and we're just trying to show what...
Am I correct, this Channel 5?
I think it's Channel 5, I believe it, Your Honor. You know, and the problem is, this is available to all of us. You told us to go out and try to subpoena whatever we could. We were all trying to do that. Your Honor, with regard to any particular photograph she wants to stop at, it is common sense that when you shoot a video It's going to show people at different locations. Detective Lang can explain that. The jury understands that. Nobody's trying to mislead anybody. What we're trying to show is what took place at the scene. Make no mistake about it. What we're talking about is their fear of anybody seeing what took place out there. That's all this is about. Have you ever seen them protest and argue for 1 month over something that is admissible? This is clearly admissible. They have Detective Lang. They have every officer out there to make this clear. We will make it clear. Nobody's trying to mislead anybody about the American Journal thing. What the court allowed us to do on the American Journal was to ask whether or not anybody had seen that officer. We took American Journal out of the photo. It was a print. There was never any attempt to mislead anybody about that. What happened at that...
Mr. Cochran, that's apples and oranges.
All right. Well, she brought the apples and oranges up, Your Honor. You didn't say that when... Well, I won't bring up what you didn't say when she was here. But that is apples and oranges, but she brought up the apples and oranges. So since we're talking about fruit, let me get back to the right fruit. This is appropriate fruit for this jury, Your Honor, and we will handle it in an appropriate way. And the court knows we have witnesses here. Nobody's trying to distort or mislead. This is a videotape, Judge, of what happened there. You yourself have seen videotapes. They're available to everybody. Everybody tries their case the way they want to. If they want to hide what took place out there and try to create a sterile view of one man's opinion by calling somebody to the stand, so be it. If we want to show what actually took place, so the jury sees Jacopo, so the jury sees Miss Ratcliffe, so the jury sees Phillips is where he was and what he had to do, then I think that's absolutely our right, and this defendant should not be punished by this. And it's unfair and it's outrageous, and we want to proceed with this at this point, Your Honor. We've laid the appropriate foundation. We've cited the cases. We want to move on and get this thing done and move on with our cross-examination. We've lost this morning. We're now losing much of the afternoon. We'd like to resolve this.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, excuse me, counsel. Detective Lang, now that you've seen that videotape, can you ascertain where people are standing from those camera angles?
Not really, Your Honor. I'm pretty sure about where I was in my location, but I can't tell where anyone else was because I can't see the bottom of their legs, their position.
There's another problem with this. Is that
Yes.
The defense has failed to lay any foundation at all. I don't know why Mr. Cochran keeps saying that. There's been no foundation laid for this. There's been no one called to authenticate this tape or how it was made. And just because it's good enough for Channel 5 doesn't mean it's good enough for this jury. I think there's a big difference between what you can show on a news TV show, as we've seen, and what you can do in a court of law. You know, there have been, the problem with veracity is not that we're accusing Channel 5 of lying. That's not their fault. They were out there, they were trying to take the most accurate picture they could from a distance. They did the best they could.
Channel 5 would have a Chicago lawyer.
Right. But what I'm concerned about is this, Your Honor. Channel 5 did not shoot that scene for the purpose of introducing the matter in court. They shot a scene as best they could from a limited vantage point so that they could put it on television. That's all. They weren't looking to admit something in a court of law so that they could most accurately depict everything at all. That wasn't their purpose. That wasn't their focus. I'm not casting any aspersions on them. But this is a court of law, and our standards have to be higher. And we have to require more for this jury. And we have to make sure that this jury does get the accurate truth, and all of the truth. Not a distortion, and not a piece of a truth, and not a little corner over here that pleases the defense, but the whole truth. And that's what the people are looking for. If they want to have the jury see Jacopo, the jury see Ratcliffe, they know where to find them. These people can be subpoenaed. They're not hiding somewhere. And Mr. Cochran knows that very well. He doesn't want the jury to get the truth. He doesn't like the fact that we have witnesses taking the witness stand and telling it the way it really was. He doesn't want that to happen. We're doing it with very painstaking care. He doesn't like it. He wants to spin that. He wants to distort that. He wants to make it appear in a way that it never was. And so what a perfect thing. He's got a tape that was taken that happens to distort the scene completely. He's got the perfect vehicle for it. But it is not appropriate in a court of law. He can entertain his friends with it, and he can tell all he wants about how we're hiding the truth. We are the only ones seeking the truth in this courtroom. We are the only side, on counsel table, Your Honor, at counsel table. let me make that real clear. We are trying to make sure the jury gets the accurate evidence, the truth of the matter, and a complete picture. And the defense wants to hand them a distortion and a half-truth. And that's what this is. Yes, it tells you that certain people are at the crime scene. But the one thing that the defense is claiming it wants to admit it for is never shown by this tape. In fact, you never see anyone's feet. So their claimed probative value is non-existent. And all we have left is prejudicial value. That is the value that it has for the defense in misleading this jury. And that's what the people are required to prevent. And that's what we are seeking the court's order to say, no, you cannot confuse, no, you cannot distort, this jury will get the truth, and this tape is not the truth.
All right. Briefly, Mr. Cochran.
In this courtroom, we've heard so many times how the people are the only ones seeking the truth, Your Honor. We welcome their witnesses. I welcome Lang, as you saw yesterday. I welcome all the witnesses they're going to bring. They can't stand the truth. We are the ones introducing the truth here. We're showing a videotape. Now, the fact that somebody can't see somebody's legs, that's preposterous, Your Honor. The part of a videotape, the beauty is you stand there and you look at it, and you can tell where people are standing. You can see that some of the people are standing in the shrubbery. You can see exactly where they are. That's what a videotape is. I'm sure that in every case, you know, it's amazing. I'm sure people all across America are amazed at this argument. Somebody wants to keep a videotape of a scene out. You know, Judge, this all would have been handled appropriately if the LAPD would videotape these crime scenes like other big city departments do. They'd have their own video, but they don't do that. So we have to go and get the next best thing we can. We're not trying to hide. They should change their procedure. We're bringing in what we have under the circumstances, and they have to live with that, Judge. It's admissible, it's impeaching, it's relevant, and as to the spatial differences, we can cover that up. This is not going to be a 352 problem when you weigh this. You can understand where the people stand up and make these grandiose speeches that are falling on deaf ears to everybody. I don't know who they're spinning it to. The jury's not out here. And we're not impressed at all. We know who's seeking the truth here. And so the question is for them to talk all they want. As the judge, you understand, you have asked me last night to focus on those 3 or 4 areas. We've come back and done exactly what you've asked us to do. Whatever you asked to do in this regard, we've done it. This is admissible, and if there's any question of confusion, I'm sure it'll be cleared up by both sides. And that's the question, and that's what happened. This is a videotape of what actually happened, brought about because they don't do this at the LAPD like other departments do. It's the best evidence that you're ever going to have in this instance. And it's relevant, and I ask the court to let us proceed with this at this point. You've listened to us very patiently, and it's now time to rule, Your Honor. We've been talking about this since January.
All right. Thank you, counsel.
Your Honor, can I just point out one thing? I won't even stand up.
Well, Your Honor, do we have
If we do have to clear it up, if, as Mr. Cochran says, concede, we have to clear it up by calling additional witnesses, then it's really a 352 issue.
I didn't say clear it up. I said if there's any problems.
We're going to wind up calling another dozen witnesses to clear up all the mess that's made by the distortion of that video. So it's an undue consumption of time as well.
Fine. Thank you, counsel. Always interesting to hear these arguments. And I don't mean that facetiously because, I mean, it is fascinating since it is a videotape which ostensibly is as accurate a depiction as we will ever get. It is not someone's recollection or interpretation. It's the events as they unfolded. And the court is able to discern from looking at the videotape itself that this videotape was taken at a relevant point in time when the coroner's investigator, Ms. Radcliffe, arrives. She appears to be briefed by Detective Lang. We see Radcliffe and Lang at the top of this, what clearly appears to me to be the top of the steps. I then see them move down to within 2 steps above the body of Nicole Brown Simpson at the bottom of the stairs. I observe them to be looking over the body, and Lang appears to be describing to Radcliffe what is there. We do have the benefit of the People's Exhibit, which shows the blood on the steps and the footprints, which appear to be avoided. We have Jacobo arrive. We see him check in with Officer Cummings. We see Detective Lang take care to step over the body of Nicole Brown Simpson. He then holds a measuring stick and a ruler, appears to be measuring things. Then we see him step into the planter area. It appears that when he does that, he looks around and takes care as to when he steps. True, you cannot actually see what it is he is actually stepping upon. That is excerpt number 1, and I find that the probative value outweighs the prejudice on that, and I'll allow it. As to number 2, we start with a distant shot, and then it is shows the corners with the plastic sheeting preparing to remove the body of Nicole Brown Simpson, and then the body placed on the cart. And I take it the probative value of that is the fact that the coroner's people are actually standing in the walkway as they spread out the plastic over the cotton sheet and remove the body. indicating that they were walking in the walkway where the blood was, but they're not walking on the steps where the footprints were, and the footprints remain unobscured, so they appear not to have been disturbed. I find the probative value outweighs the prejudicial value. I'll allow that as well. Excerpt number 3 starts with a distance shot of the crowd around the step area. We see Investigator Fung step out of the planter area where the body of Ronald Goldman was discovered, although we do not see that body. We see him come out not wearing gloves, however having a paper bag in his hands. The coroners then appear to spread out another plastic sheet and appear to be moving the second body, which is now out on the walkway. That appears to be Ronald Goldman's body from the sequence of events. We see Lang in the planter area watching the wrapping of the second body, Ronald Goldman, and we observe him to be making measurements and taking notes at the time, and I find that the probative value of this also outweighs any prejudicial value. I'll allow this. However, I am going to instruct the jurors that they are to take into consideration in evaluating these videotapes the angle and any distortion that there might be from using the lenses in shape, the lenses that were actually used.
Thank you.
Let's have the jury, please.
John, here's one other, can we have, take the next step out, there's one other one we should have.
That one I have concern about because it stops abruptly. I want to see the entire tape from which it was taken. Detective Lang, why don't you step outside? Mr. Cochran.
Thank you very kindly, Your Honor. With regard, we presented this tape. We think this tape is impeaching. We'd ask the court to take a look at it, and perhaps we can answer the questions if there's other parts of the tape. What it shows...
No, I understand what it shows. What it shows is Detective Lang walking out of the Rockingham residence.
Right.
Walks to his car.
Right. He's carrying the tennis shoes, just carrying the tennis shoes, puts them in the right front seat of the car.
Right, and then
Now,
tape ends.
Right, well, and he then drove, I think the other part, we saw it last night, I think he then, Mr. Blazer can represent, he drove off. The point I'd like to hear from Mr. Blazer, but the point is, yesterday on
I understand what the
examination,
point
he
is.
says he put it in a box in the trunk, he drove off. It's impeaching, Your Honor, and you hear from Blazer who had the
No,
tape.
my point, Mr. Cochran, is that the tape that you gave to me this morning to view stops with him placing it on the front seat of his car. He doesn't enter the car, he doesn't start the car, he doesn't drive off, it just ends right
Let's
there.
hear from Mr. Blazer, Your Honor.
You know, I've watched that tape many times, and we had that dub made last night. That's basically the end of it. He drives off, I think, is in the tape, but there's no, he doesn't take the shoes and put them someplace else. That's the end of the
Right.
clip.
Well, out of curiosity, why did you choose not to show that to me?
This was part of a long tape that we took just a small clip out of because we just wanted to illustrate putting the shoes on the front seat. There was nothing significant after that.
Glad to let you see that.
No, that tape is, that entire tape is being copied, even though I think we've already given it to the prosecution. We're making copies of everything to give them another set, as well as to provide you with a set of everything that we have. So that tape is now at a studio being copied.
And the point, if I can say this, Your Honor, with regard to it, it's impeaching, and
No,
I can then...
Mr. Cochran,
Okay.
I understand
All right.
the value, I understand
All
why
right.
you...
I know.
I'm just saying that it doesn't
Sure.
have the impeachment value until he starts up the car and drives off.
Well, I'm sure we can get
With the
that.
tennis shoes still there.
I'm sure we can get that part down here.
If
and-
that's true.
And I'm sure I can ask him, didn't you then put the tennis shoes there and then drive off? But I'm sure we can get that. I mean, if that was just a point where he drives off, is that the representation? He drove off at that point?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's exactly the point. So, I mean, I think that the important part is he said under oath
I
here
understand
yesterday what he said.
I recall
Put them
what
in
he
the
said.
trunk. Right.
But it
Yeah.
doesn't become probative until he drives off, does it?
Your Honor, I can...
Well, I think when he puts them in that front seat, it's pretty probative. He didn't tell us that yesterday. But I understand what you're saying, and
Well, if the tape ends with him putting he reaches in and places it on the passenger side of the front
Right.
seat, and then my tape ends.
The court allows us to
Abruptly.
see, and we'll do what we can.
All right.
Mr. Blazer says he'll go, leave and get it right down here.
Well, let's start with the jury with what we have.
Sure, that's fine. He'll be back.
We're not, the court's not allowing it in until we see the entire...
That's correct. All right, Deputy Magnero, let's have the jurors, please.